because the game is different. Like I want people to understand and our fans to understand that playing 82 games in the 80s and 90s is not the same as playing 82 games in the 2020s.
And he dropped one question that stopped the entire Lakers crew in their tracks. By that point, Rob Pelinka was already sweating bullets, frantically trying to separate the two giants. That's when LeBron realized his latest podcast comments didn't just trend online. They ignited a feud with the one guy massive enough to actually crush his legacy. Just wait until you hear the question Shaq used to silence LeBron's whole team, and why insiders are calling this the beginning of the end for the king. Seriously, if you thought the podcast clip was crazy, the footage the Lakers are trying to wipe is absolutely explosive. We're talking about a night that was meant to celebrate longevity, but ended up looking like a total meltdown. Picture it, February 1st, 2026, and the Lakers just got roasted at Madison Square Garden. They lost 112-100, and honestly, the score made it look closer than it was. OG Anunoby and Landry Shamet were basically treating the LA defense like a pregame shoot-around. Luka Doncic dropped 30, while LeBron managed 22. But let's be real, he looked every single day of his 41 years on that court. Post-game, he's heading down the MSG tunnel, probably brainstorming excuses for the next podcast episode, when he hits a human brick wall. Shaq was posted up against the concrete, and trust me, he wasn't looking to film a comedy segment for TNT. He was 325 pounds of pure 90s-era aggression, physically sealing off the locker room entrance. Witnesses said the tension went from calm to critical in a split second. Shaq didn't offer a handshake or a what's up. He stared right into LeBron's soul and delivered a line that froze the room. How you gonna claim this era is tough when you play in a league where staring at a guy too hard gets you a technical? Naturally, LeBron tried to go into professor mode, lecturing about high IQ basketball, spacing, and how the game velocity is higher in 2026. Shaq wasn't having any of it. He cut him off, barking, "Pace means nothing when the rules say nobody is allowed to touch you. You're only hyping up speed because you're scared to admit your body's slowing down and you're playing in a soft era." Then, the Diesel went for the kill shot. He dragged Anthony Davis, Joel Embiid, and every other star sitting out games into the conversation as evidence. Shaq's entire argument? Back in his day, you didn't sit unless a bone was sticking out. Nowadays, dudes take a 3-week vacation just for landing awkward. He called LeBron straight up delusional for that podcast take. But it gets even wilder. The confrontation escalated so much that people had to physically intervene to drag Shaq back. Imagine a bunch of executives in suits trying to restrain a 7-foot tank while the arena staff just watched from the shadows, stunned. And hold on until we dig into the historical stats, because the data proves the 90s NBA wasn't just rougher, it was basically a different sport entirely. But before we dive into the math, you gotta understand why Shaq finally snapped. The big man is pretty much the last of his kind. He's one of the few who survived both eras. He watched the sport transform from actual combat to the soft, casual product we see today. He came into the league in '92, trading elbows with '80s enforcers who were trained to take your head off if you breathed on them wrong. He watched the hand-checking rules disappear in 2004. He saw flagrant foul rules turn into bubble wrap, and he watched the floor spacing expand until the court couldn't get any wider. So hearing LeBron claim today's game is tougher feels like an insult to every legend who had to bleed for a layup. And don't fall for that speed narrative. LeBron loves to hype up the modern pace, but if you check the receipts, his math doesn't add up. Back in the 84 to 85 season, the league average pace was 102. The next year, still 102. Fast forward to 2026, and the average has actually dropped to around 99.5. The 85 Nuggets were running at a ridiculous 107 pace, a speed that would have modern squads gasping for air by halftime. Or look at the Showtime Lakers, who were always pushing over 100. The difference? They were doing that while getting hand-checked, clotheslined, and thrown into the stands. Freedom of movement didn't exist back then. It was just survival. You want tough? Let's talk about the Jordan rules. The Detroit Pistons didn't run a standard defense. They literally had a playbook on how to assault Michael Jordan without going to jail. If MJ drove to the hoop, he was hitting the deck. End of story. There were no flagrant ones for unnecessary contact. Now, contrast that with the lifestyle of a 2026 superstar. LeBron drops over $1 million annually on his body cryo chambers, oxygen tanks, private chefs, and custom jets with full-size beds for naps. Back in the 80s, Chuck and Magic were flying commercial, fighting strangers for armrests, and crashing at standard hotels. Shaq even called this out in April 2025, saying LeBron's long career is just a result of playing in a softer time.
It's less physical. And he's always done this his whole career. He never really done that. So, but the fact that it's less physical, I think it definitely helps.
Even the GOAT, Michael Jordan, weighed in back in June 2025. MJ didn't just question these guys' drive.
That type of competition, that type of competitiveness is what I live for, and I miss it. I miss that aspect of playing the game of basketball.
Jordan played the full 82 games in 9 separate seasons, and Kobe Bryant famously played through a broken finger, refusing to take a seat. Yet today, LeBron's team defends sitting out whenever a knee feels tight. That's why Shaq's ranking on Netflix earlier this year made such waves. Asked for his top 10, he put MJ at 1 and Kobe at 2.
Number 3, I'm going to go with the King, LeBron James. Number 2, I'm going with, rest in peace, Kobe Bean Bryant. And number 1, the greatest player of all time, is Michael Jordan.
And number 1, the greatest of all time, is Michael Jordan. Shaq's logic was simple. It's about killer instinct. Jordan didn't need a microphone to tell you how tough the league was. He just went out there and proved it by destroying everyone in his way, no matter how hard they tried to break him physically. If you think Shaq's the only one tired of the excuses, you haven't heard Paul Pierce's take on LeBron's speed theory. He didn't just disagree, he went nuclear. But look, the real reason Shaq snapped in that tunnel wasn't just about a podcast. It's because for the legends who built this league, LeBron is missing the one thing $1 billion can't buy, the fear factor.
I didn't think players really feared LeBron like they did Jordan.
Never really heard any players say they fear LeBron.
I've never really heard any players say they fear LeBron. And it's a valid point. You respect LeBron's numbers, sure, but nobody was losing sleep over him. Nobody was thinking, oh man, I gotta play LeBron today. This is gonna be a nightmare. But when you faced MJ or Kobe, you knew they were coming to take your soul. You weren't just worried about losing the game. You used to be petrified of getting posterized or having your soul snatched in front of a packed arena. Fast forward to today, and the league has pivoted from that gladiator mindset to this soft, kumbaya podcast culture we're stuck with. You've got LeBron chopping it up on mics with Tyrese Halliburton, giggling like they're bunkmates at summer camp. It's a massive departure from the 90s, and that's exactly why Shaq made his stance official on his list. He put MJ at number 1, Kobe at number 2, and LeBron down at number 3. Shaq battled both of those legends, and he's basically saying, if your life depends on one final shot, you're dialing up the Black Mamba, not the 41-year-old busy worrying about his brand image and making friends. And for anyone claiming the 90s were just slow, do yourself a favor. Go pull up the tape of the 1989 Pistons-Bulls series. Guys like Bill Laimbeer, Rick Mahorn, and Charles Oakley weren't playing defense. They were committing what would legally be considered assault in almost any other context. Laimbeer's job was ensuring Larry Bird didn't walk off that floor without a bruise or a limp that was just standard operating procedure. And the kicker? Bird would tape it up and be back the next night to drop 40. Try that stuff today, you're looking at an instant ejection and a 3-game ban. You'd think LeBron would have the self-awareness to pipe down and show some reverence for the guys who built this league.
I think when I first came into the league, Reese, some of the biggest concerns of injuries was like, a high ankle sprain. You was afraid to step on somebody's ankle because there was 4 or 5 guys sitting in the paint. Because it was 4 or 5 guys sitting in the paint. And if you land on somebody's ankle, you get a high ankle sprain, you out 4 to 6 weeks. Now, that's not really much you don't really see that as much now because the game is so spread open, it's so much pace. But now you see the new high ankle sprain is the calf.
Shaq nearly lost it hearing that take, especially considering he spent his entire prime getting hacked like he was a sequoia tree. Or look at Isaiah Thomas. Remember the 1988 finals? Isaiah was out there on one leg, literally dragging a foot swollen up like a grapefruit, and still managed to torch them for 25 points in a single quarter. Yet, according to LeBron, his era of load management and billion-dollar recovery budgets is tougher. His favorite talking point is that the 90s was just 4 unathletic, stiff guys clogging the lane. Shaq took that personally, and rightfully so. You're talking about Hakeem, David Robinson, and a young, lean Shaq. These weren't traffic cones. They were apex predators. These were 7-footers who ran the floor like guards and protected the rim in ways that would make today's bigs look like middle schoolers. NBC News recently asked Shaq for his all-time starting 5, and he didn't mince words.
So if you had to do your all-time NBA starting 5, do you have one?
Kobe and Mike.
Okay.
That's the 1 and the 2. The 3, I got to go with Bird.
Okay.
4, I got to go with Malone. And 5, I got to go with Hakeem.
You left somebody out.
No.
He even left himself off the list. That shows you how serious he is. When they pressed him about LeBron, Shaq didn't even flinch. He basically insinuated that if he's building a squad to win rings, he needs killers, not guys obsessing over podcast metrics. But if you think Shaq was the only one ready to lose it over those sound bites, you definitely missed Paul Pierce's reaction. The truth didn't just disagree. He took LeBron's entire theory about pace and space and threw it straight into the dumpster on national television. Pierce jumped on his new show, No Fouls Given, looking like he wanted to reach through the screen. He's sitting with Danny Green, who tried to cape for the modern game, and Pierce just shut him down mid-thought. He goes, "LeBron is talking about speed? Please. We played in the 2000s when you actually had to fight over a screen. Now, you just switch, take a nap, and call it advanced analytics." Pierce's entire argument is that this speed LeBron brags about is artificial because the refs won't let you touch anybody. Back in the day, if you tried to sprint down the lane without a plan, guys like Ben Wallace or Kevin Garnett would put you into the basket support. There was a physical tax you had to pay just to cross half court, and you have to understand the history here. This isn't just old man yells at cloud. Pierce and LeBron have been at each other's throats since that 2008 Eastern Conference semis, where they both dropped 40 in Game 7. That was back when the NBA still had some grit, that 90s Warrior mindset. These guys used to literally spit at each other in the preseason. Pierce has never forgotten that LeBron had to pack his bags for Miami just to finally get through him. In Pierce's eyes, LeBron is hyping up the difficulty of the modern game to explain why he's struggling to keep up with the young guns in 2026. And when you really break it down, you have to wonder, for a guy who was the ultimate competitor in his prime, why is he caping for a soft era right as he's aging out of the league? Pierce doubled down, calling modern switching defenses a cheat code for lazy superstars. In the 90s or 2000s, if you were guarding a star, you were attached to his hip. You fought through the elbow, you scraped under the screen, and you ate those bruises. Today, you just point, switch jerseys, and pray the other guy bricks a wide open three.
Yeah, mentally
so
it is.
many times I'm bruised up
Yeah.
after the game. My shoulder hurts.
It's definitely
my
more
hip
physical.
is hurting.
So why were more guys playing 75 games a year then?
Because we was tougher. Well, now you're switching everything.
He told Danny Green point blank, the only reason guys are putting up these video game numbers is because the enforcer role has been hunted to extinction. You can't be a Charles Oakley or a Rick Mahorn anymore because you'd be suspended for the season before Thanksgiving. But here is the real kicker. On January 29th, for the first time in 21 years, basically an eternity in sports, the NBA announced the All-Star starters, and LeBron James was missing. This dude has been a lock for the All-Star game since most of us were in homeroom. But the league has finally turned the page. Luka Doncic is the new face of the West. The fans, the media, and even the players voted LeBron into the history books. In the final tally for Western Conference frontcourt, he tied for 9th in the media vote, 3 votes total, and finished 9th overall. 9th. That is essentially an eviction notice. Honestly, nobody wants to watch a 41-year-old anchor drag the team down anymore. This narrative that the game is harder now is the last card he has up his sleeve. Think about it. If the game is so much faster and more physical, why are guys playing until they're 40? In the 90s, the league chewed you up and spit you out by 33. If you played 40 minutes of what was basically a wrestling match every night, there's no way your body holds up for 2 decades. LeBron sticking around this long isn't just proof of greatness. It's proof he's playing in a sanitized era where you can load manage your way to a 20-year career. And Shaq smelled blood in the water. When the Inside the NBA crew was picking reserves on January 29th, Shaq left LeBron off his list entirely, but he did it with a twist of the knife.
A few players that's only been slowed down because of their age. I don't want to see the king coming off the bench.
So you don't even want to see him at the game at all?
No.
Shaq made it loud and clear. The king is looking like a charity invite at this point. And truthfully, Diesel would prefer he wasn't even in the building. Sir Charles didn't pull any punches either. Barkley dropped a massive bomb, claiming Bron is finished in Los Angeles and forecasting a farewell lap back home in Ohio.
Well, there's one thing I'm sure of. This is last year with the Lakers. He's not going to play with the Lakers next year. I've always said I'd like to see him finish in Cleveland. I'm not opposed to him getting traded to Cleveland this year.
James saw the writing on the wall. He knew those all-star returns were going to be a PR nightmare, so he released that episode as a preemptive strike. He tried to pivot the narrative to a Jordan versus LeBron debate before the public realized the coaches don't even view him as top 5 material in his own conference anymore. The kicker for LeBron? The actual Lakers royalty is backing O'Neal. Back in September 2025, Magic Johnson sat down for an interview and didn't mince words. He picked MJ as the greatest of all time, prioritizing pure dominance over racking up stats simply by sticking around.
That's what make him a bad boy and the best that's ever done it. Don't get it twisted. I love LeBron, but
It just makes you a tenured employee. For a guy like Shaq, wearing that jersey isn't a marketing strategy or a method to move merchandise. It's practically a religion. This is the man who delivered the last three-peat the league has witnessed, running the table from 2000 to 2002. He knows the actual cost of those rings. It wasn't about tempo and floor spacing or hopping on mics with your buddies. It was 48 minutes of trench warfare against squads like San Antonio and Sacramento designed specifically to neutralize him. He dealt with 7-foot giants like Vlade Divac and Chris Webber, throwing elbows at his midsection on every single possession. So when James hops on a broadcast claiming the modern game is tougher just because the tempo is higher, to Diesel, that's not just a garbage take. It's a slap in the face to the franchise's legacy. Frankly, the rest of the Alumni Association is fed up too. On January 28th, 2026, 5-time champion Ron Harper, a guy who survived both the Jordan dynasty and the Shaq-Kobe era, finally reached his limit. He caught that clip of James equating calf issues to serious ankle trauma, and he didn't bother typing out a manifesto. He just fired off a blunt post on X. These excuses are stupid. To give you some context, Harper is 62 years old and still brings more enforcer energy than half the current roster. He's looking at James like, man, I was 36. Lacing up for 80 games and locking down the opposing superstar without a $1 billion recovery budget or a cryo chamber. To legends like O'Neal and Harper, LeBron isn't just sticking up for today's game. He's attempting to invalidate the brutality they endured just to polish his own longevity narrative. Tensions are boiling over in Los Angeles because the fan base raised on Magic's Showtime and Shaq's power has zero patience for complaints about soft tissue tweaks. They're watching a 41-year-old who appears more concerned with his streaming numbers than the team's defensive efficiency. The craziest aspect of this whole breakdown is the absolute double standard. James spent decades positioning himself as a historian of the sport, praising the greats whenever it supported his chosen one story. But the moment the comparison gets uncomfortable, he changes his tune. All of a sudden, the era that forged Jordan and O'Neal wasn't harder, it was just plodding and simple. It's a textbook ego play. James realizes the 2026 All-Star omission wasn't an accident. It was a glaring sign that the clock has run out. That's why he unleashed those hot takes. It was a defensive maneuver. His message is essentially, if I'm not dominating, it's because the sport is more difficult now than it was for Mike. But you can't play both sides of the fence. You can't base your GOAT case on longevity while simultaneously confessing you've only lasted this long because the NBA outlawed contact. If the 90s were so slow, why did it take a physical specimen like James until 2026 to realize he couldn't crack the starting 5? James has effectively torched his relationship with the pantheon of basketball greatness. He thought he was being slick, but he only confirmed he doesn't sit at the same table as his predecessors. Keep the scoring record, LeBron. Grind out 25 years in a sanitized league, but you'll never earn the admiration of the giants you just disrespected. The battle lines are drawn, so for everyone watching, you have to pick a side. Are you rolling with the 90s gladiators who battled through blood and broken bones? Or are you siding with the podcast king? The old guard made their call, and they're riding with Shaq.